Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 8th lecture of Rest in Belief. In our previous Lecture 7, we confirmed that Acts 1:8 is not a simple missionary map, but a dispensational timeline extending from Jerusalem to Samaria and unto the uttermost part of the earth. We realized the absolute necessity that, in order to transition from the law to grace, a transitional period called Samaria, where those two forces violently collide, must absolutely exist. Then, did the blueprint for these three ages suddenly appear only when we reach the book of Acts? Absolutely not. God's design transcends our imagination. The framework of this Samaritan doctrine was already perfectly foreshadowed in the arrangement order of the first three books that open the New Testament, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Today we will trace the shocking structure hidden within the Synoptic Gospels and the secret entwined in the bloodline of John Mark, who recorded the Gospel of Mark, the text of the most turbulent and dynamic transitional period. Please look at the screen. Let us substitute the blueprint of Acts 1:8 directly into the three Synoptic Gospels. First in Jerusalem and in all Judea, this corresponds exactly with the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is a strictly Jewish book. It begins with the genealogy of Abraham and David and portrays Jesus as the King of the Jews. It is the perfect type of Jerusalem, thoroughly longing for the law and the earthly kingdom. Third, unto the uttermost part of the earth. This corresponds with the Gospel of Luke. Written by Luke, a Gentile physician, the genealogy in this book, unlike Matthew's, traces back beyond the Jews all the way to Adam, the ancestor of all mankind. The phrase in Luke 2:32, a light to lighten the Gentiles, is definitive proof that this book is the type of the uttermost part of the earth. Absolute grace open to all humanity without any Jewish distinction. Then what is the second book, the Gospel of Mark, which is wedged between the extreme law of Matthew and the extreme grace of Luke? It is precisely the type of Samaria, the transitional period where water and oil collide and boil like molten lava. Those who have read Mark will know this. Unlike the other Gospels, this book does not gently list genealogies or begin with the story of Jesus' birth. From the very first chapter, it charges forward breathlessly with the rough voice of John the Baptist crying in the wilderness. Do you know what word is used most frequently in the Gospel of Mark? It is the word straightway, immediately. Events violently collide with other events, and miracles and persecution intersect relentlessly. Just as a chick breaks the shell of an egg, or as one must shatter the eggshell of Samaria to cross from the territory of the law to the territory of grace, the Gospel of Mark functions as the most dynamic transitional text in the New Testament. Now let us pose a crucial question here. Whom on earth did God choose to record this transitional text symbolizing Samaria? The author is John Mark. However, if we trace his lineage, his very bloodline deep within the Bible, a staggering secret is revealed. Looking at Colossians 4:10, a prison epistle, Paul reveals Mark's identity like this. Marcus, sister's son to Barnabas. That's right. John Mark was none other than the nephew of Barnabas. Everyone, who is Barnabas? Barnabas was the single stepping stone in the book of Acts that connected the 12 apostles of the law with Paul, the apostle of grace. He was a strict legalist, a Levite responsible for Old Testament sacrifices, yet simultaneously he possessed a Samaritan-like background, having been born in the Gentile land of Cyprus. When the Jews distrusted Paul, who was to become the apostle to the Gentiles, it was Barnabas who took him by the hand and brought him to the apostles in Jerusalem. Traveling back and forth between Jerusalem, representing the law, and Antioch, representing grace, Barnabas absorbed that violent collision with his entire being. He was the most perfect apostle of Samaria in this historical timeline. As proof of this, he vanishes completely from the biblical record before the pure Gentile church begins after Acts 28, just as the Samaritan age briefly appeared and then faded away. And John Mark was the blood nephew of that very apostle of Samaria, Barnabas. He was the bloodline of the transition. Look at the trajectory that pierces through the entirety of John Mark's life. He wandered his whole life between the Jerusalem of the law and the Paul of grace. Having followed Paul on his first missionary journey, Mark could not endure Paul's pure gospel of grace pouring out indiscriminately upon the Gentiles. His legalistic bloodline weighed him down, and he eventually fled midway, returning to Jerusalem. And in Acts 15, the one who provided the cause for the painful split where Barnabas and Paul, the apostle of Samaria and the apostle to the uttermost part of the earth, parted ways forever, was also none other than Mark. He was a transitional man, fiercely oscillating between the law and grace. The Holy Spirit specifically chose John Mark, through whom the blood of the transition flowed, to record the Gospel of Mark, the text of violent collision wedged between Matthew and Luke. Could this possibly be a coincidence? There is not an inch of error in God's design. We have confirmed that the blueprint of Acts 1:8 is perfectly embedded in the order of the Gospels, and that God's dispensational timeline operates flawlessly even within the bloodlines of the authors who recorded the Bible and the disputes between its figures. Now that this perfect timeline is engraved in our minds, it is time to earnestly dissect the history of the book of Acts. In our next session, Lecture 9, we will dissect the first half of Acts from chapter 1 through chapter 12. We will draw a definitive line clarifying why we must absolutely never equate Peter and the disciples of this period with the Grace Church of today, exposing the reality of the completely closed gates of Jerusalem. Do not miss the next lecture, where the fog of Acts will be lifted. Until now, this has been Rest in Belief. Thank you.